Hi, South Huntington community. I'm Miss Fischer from Countrywood Primary Center, and today I'm going to read to you Rocket Writes a Story by Tad Hills. Rocket loved books. He loved to read them to himself or to sit quietly by his teacher, to the little yellow bird as she read them aloud. Rocket even liked the way books smelled. When he opened a new book, it smelled like a place he'd never been to, like a friend he'd never met. The little yellow bird agreed. Books are inspiring. They make me sing. Rocket loved words, too. After snack time, his teacher would say, "Rocket, why don't you use that nose of yours to sniff out some new words?" And off he'd go. He'd fetch some nice ones like buttercup and bug and feather and nest. "I'm looking for words," Rocket would announce to anyone who'd listen. Rocket always brought his words back to the classroom and wrote them down. The little yellow bird would help him spell the tricky ones, and then they'd hang them on their word tree. Sometimes the bird added her own words to the collection. "This one is small, but I promise it'll come in handy," she'd say. The word is up. "Magnificent," chirped the little bird once their tree was covered. "Now what shall we do with all of these splendid words?" Rocket thought all afternoon. Then he had an idea. This is something you guys could do at home too. Rocket left school that day with a very waggy tail. "I'm going to write a story," he declared to Fred and Emma. "My story will be an adventure about the great wide world," he told the butterfly. "I will use many words," he explained to Mr. Barker. "Hello up there," he called as he passed the tree where he had found the word nest. "I'm going to write a story." The next day, Rocket returned to his classroom. It was time to begin. He looked down at the blank page, and the blank page looked up at him. But no story would come. At snack time, Rocket gave up. "I don't know what to write," he told his teacher. "Don't worry," the little yellow bird replied. "One of the hardest parts of writing is coming up with a good story, but it's one of the most fun, too. Perhaps you want to write about something that you've seen." "A bug?" asked Rocket. "Yes," sang his teacher. "Stories need good characters. Or what about something that happened to you? Or something you really enjoy?" "My favorite stick?" suggested Rocket. "Of course," said the bird. "Or you could write about that something that inspires you." "Inspires me?" asked Rocket. "Yes, something that excites you," the little yellow bird sang. Rocket took a walk and looked for inspiration. He thought about friends he knew and places he'd been. He stuck his nose high in the air and sniffed the gentle breeze. And there it was, a delightful smell of pine needles and feathers. Inspiration! For the rest of the morning, he thought about feathers and pine needles and feathers, and that afternoon he started to write. In the evening, Rocket followed the beautiful smell until he found himself at the tree with the nest. "Hello again," he called into the branches. "Is anyone home?" He heard rustling from above, but no one answered. "I'm sorry to disturb you, but I must tell you that you smell very nice." "Very inspiring. May I ask who you are?" Still nothing. "Perhaps I'll come back at a more convenient time," he said, and trotted off. That night, as Rocket watched the stars, he thought about feathers and a nest in a pine tree. He thought about his story and his collection of words. On his way to school the next day, Rocket was surprised by what he saw. "A brand new word," he said, "and it's already written down, it says." He tried to sound out the word. "Owl," came a quiet voice from the branches. "It says owl. That's me." "Thank you, Owl," Rocket called. "I'm always looking for words, and this one's a beauty." Rocket ran all the way to his classroom. "O-W-L, owl. Now there's a word you don't hear every day," chirped Little Yellow Bird. "Only 3 letters, but what a word." "It was a present," explained Rocket, and he added the new word to his story. "I'm writing a story about you," Rocket announced proudly to the owl the next morning. The owl poked her head out of the nest, and for the first time, Rocket saw her friendly face. Her big round eyes blinked below feathery tufts. "About me?" she asked softly. "Would you like to come down and hear it?" asked Rocket. "Thank you, but I think I'll listen from my nest," the owl answered. So Rocket cleared his throat and began to read. "Once there was an owl. She smelled like feathers and pine needles. She lived in a tree." The owl's eyes widened. "Is there more?" "There will be," said Rocket. Each day, Rocket worked on his story. He wrote words down and crossed words out. When things were going well, he wagged his tail. When he didn't know what to write, he growled. Sometimes he drew pictures for his story or took a walk in the meadow to look for inspiration. The little yellow bird encouraged him. "Remember, stories take time," she'd say. She wanted to know more about the owl and asked Rocket questions. "Why do you think the owl wouldn't come down? What color is her beak? What does she do every day?" Rocket wanted to know more about the owl too. He visited her tree often and read her his story, which changed every day. The owl was captivated. And when Rocket stopped, she would always ask, "Then what happened?" At last the day came when Rocket knew he was finished. "What a fine story," chirped the little yellow bird after she read it. Rocket ran to the owl's pine tree. "It's done," he called. "Come listen." And so down and down the owl came until she was right beside Rocket. Then Rocket began to read. He read about an owl with friendly eyes and the beak the color of a buttercup. She lived in a nest high in a tree on the edge of a meadow and smelled like pine needles and feathers. She liked to nap in the daytime and listen to stories. Branch by branch, the owl came down from her nest. Rocket read. She was shy, but she was brave, too. Suddenly, Rocket stopped. He wrote something on his paper and then began to read again. One day, the owl came all the way to the ground and became my friend. The owl blinked. "Can there be one last sentence?" she asked. "Can you say, 'And the owl liked the story very much'?" "What a perfect ending," said Rocket. And it was. The end. We encourage you to write something that inspires you. We hope to see you soon. We miss you very much, and have a great afternoon.